So I figured it was about time for a bit of a rant because it's Sunday and the weather's not really conducive to doing anything else. Actually, that's not true. It's turned out to be quite sunny and at least it's warming up a bit, and that's nice. Makes a nice change from -2 in the evening or the early morning. And yeah, you'll have to put up with the noises of the parrot and the birds outside and so on. Anyway, I figured it was time to make another one of these things and throw my thoughts out there. Yes, we hear you, bird. Throw my thoughts out there because apparently, as someone said to me the other day, apparently I like the sound of my own voice. Evidently you don't know me. That's specifically to that person. Anyway, I think it's time to throw some ideas out there about the state of things and the state of the country and the state of the community, because I see things, or rather I'm positioned, fortunately or not, whichever way you look at it, I'm positioned to see things probably more than the average bloke in the community and in the greater community. And I just figured that it's worthwhile talking about, because if no one says it, then it's not said, then it's not dealt with, and then it just carries on. And the chances are that it's not going to be dealt with anyway. Chances are that stuff, it's human nature. Humans repeat history, repeat mistakes, continue bad behavior and silly choices. I would dearly love it that was different, but it seems to be the case. It seems to be that people are more concerned with the immediate whatever rather than the consequence of bad choices and present behavior. And there are so many things that really, when you start, let me go back a step. I've always, not always, for the past many decades now, the last 3 or 4 of them, I have spent a lot of time mind mapping. I don't make lists as such. I end up mind mapping. I'm quite sure that most of you know what that is. Those of you that don't, well, there's Google. So just go and Google mind map. But that's how I tend to assimilate, or assimilate information, but how I tend to categorize things and organize thinking and ideas. And I've been doing that again recently, and it's a little concerning when you start doing that and you start looking into the situation in the country and in the state of things, the state of people's thinking, and the state of the supposed leadership. And I use that term very loosely because it's highly questionable that anyone is leading this fiasco at the moment. And that goes for whatever's going on globally, never mind locally. But wherever you are watching this, I'm quite sure that you can appreciate the fact that it's probably similar in your situation as it is to ours here in this country. To put it plainly, it's a complete horse's ass. Oh, there you can enjoy the sound of the dogs howling across the way. Something we have to put up with every day. I'll have a sip of coffee while it shuts up. Or doesn't. Anyway, so I thought I should throw some thoughts around about the state of things, the community, um, priorities, and that I guess that is personal priorities and collectively as well, what we seem to be expecting in the community. And maybe that's a good place to start off, is expecting, the expectation. There seems to be a great deal of expectation out there. And I think that is an indicator of a lack or an ignorance of personal responsibility. It seems as though over the last, again, many decades, probably 50 or more years, I guess. I suppose this all started before I was even on the planet. I think that there has been a move afoot to have people's thinking change in terms of responsibility becoming a social thing rather than a personal thing. Now, if you are honest about your thoughts, you will probably see your role in it, and how you, if you don't think you consciously participate in it actively, you might be mistaken. That whole thing about participatory trophies and letting everyone try their best, and that's all very well, but it doesn't lead to much good at the end of the day. You don't want the brain surgeon working on you that's managed to qualify on time rather than on ability, and that goes for anything. And this whole thing about expectation is also linked quite tightly with tolerance, and I've spoken about that before, and it's a thing that I speak about often, in fact. Tolerance, tolerating unacceptable behavior or norms because of whatever reason. You can throw some simplified justification at whatever it is that you want, but tolerating unacceptable behavior or bad choices is only going to lead to more of those things. But that's the way I see it. If anyone would care to correct me on that, I'd be very, very interested in understanding how I'm wrong. But we seem to have arrived at a point in society, and obviously I'm talking broadly at the moment. My concerns are local because that's what I'm involved with. But societally, we seem to have arrived at a point now where there's a general expectation that somebody else should be sorting something out for you rather than you doing it for yourself. There was a time when your ancestors, wherever they came from, it matters not, ended up venturing out into the wilderness where it snows and where there's not too much to eat. And yet they survived that experience. They did whatever they had to do, whether it was learn how to make fire or cut down trees or store the wood or build a place where they wouldn't freeze. They did that because they realized that if they didn't do it, no one else was going to do it for them, and they would die. So it stands to reason then that you came from people that were able to survive. You came from people that didn't have high expectation of somebody else doing things for them. They expected that of themselves. They understood the need for responsibility. They understood the need to do what needed to be done, because the other fellow was too busy doing what needed to be done for him to do it for someone else. And that's called survival, by the way. We seem to be, I think, heading back into that sort of situation where it is becoming increasingly more evident that we have a situation where the the expectation that has been set up can in no way be fulfilled. Certainly, you have. I was going to say governments, but let's talk about this government. They take money, they pull it through their asses. It's that simple. They wash their hands with whiskey. They do ridiculous things. They store cash under their under their pillowcases and mattresses. It's actually laughable. The only thing that's more laughable is the degree to which everybody seems to accept it and tolerate it. You know, it really is. I mean, you couldn't ask for more material for if you were a stand-up comic than what you are surrounded by in terms of political rubbish and their antics. Now, how is it though that we've ended up at a point where we accept so easily the the actions of those people, for instance, in government, these politicians? How is it that we end up in a position where they get away with the most absurd things? Things that the likes of you and I would never dream of doing because we have some degree of moral conscience. I find that very interesting, that the brainwashing has become so, thank you, Bird, that the brainwashing has become so complete, so effective, that it's glossed over. Politicians say and do very stupid things, things that are clearly motivated by a self-aggrandizement and self-enrichment and greed and ego and all of those things that are morally questionable. It's quite clear that they are motivated by those things. And I don't think it's actually different in any other country. I think the degree to which they get away with it is different. There's certainly here locally a lack of accountability. And one has to ask the question, what is it that allows that to, or the programming to be so effective that it makes people like you not ask the question, not query where your money's gone, not query why some politician has been given the opportunity to say something very stupid and do something even more stupid or more dishonest. Why is it that you are so accepting of that? Or do you just do it quietly because of fear of retribution, because you know that they are in a position to make your life very difficult? I think that that's got something to do with it. In fact, I think that's got a great deal to do with it, that people are in a position now where they know that it's the old story, you know, you don't pay your rates on your property, well, they'll come and turn your electricity off. It's that simple. Which is all very well if you were receiving something for the money that you're paying. I don't think anybody actually minds paying if they actually know that the money is being put to good use. And clearly that's not the case. Or it's certainly very questionable at best. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm not quite sure where I'm heading with all of this. I think it's just a bit of a general rant and a questioning of people. You know, one of the things with any of these videos, of course, is that people are they'll only watch them until some of the truth hits home, and then things become uncomfortable. Then there's the off button. You switch it off. So if you've made it this far, well done. If you haven't made it this far, you're part of the problem, clearly. Yeah, you're nothing special if you haven't made it this far, that's for sure. You're just one of the normal people. All I'm doing here is asking questions. I'm not I'm not offering any solutions to any of this, and I think there are solutions. I think one of the problems is that the size of the communities is too large, and I think that this is one of those things that is compounded by social media. I think where you have so many thoughts on so many topics going on all the time, that it becomes a bit of a sensory overload situation, a bit of a, the mind hasn't evolved into the role of that level of computation of so many technical things concurrently, and it causes a bit of overwhelm. It's quite easy to see. There's lots of examples of it. I'll certainly not bore you with the explanations, but I think that's part of the problem. And one of the things that comes to mind is that we have this local group, and if you're watching this, you are likely to be on that group, because this is where the link will be circulated. So on that group there's about 600 people. And I made the point last night during a discussion, well, I didn't make the point, to ask the question who we was. There was a question posed about closing off the area. Why don't we close the area off? And while I appreciate the sentiment, oh, there's the dog barking again. Well done. While I appreciate the sentiment, no one seems to look at the practicality of all of this. But the practical issue aside, what I find of interest is the question and the terminology and the we. And this seems to be part of the problem in the community, where we have 600 people on a group, and we have less than 5% in reality that actually participate and contribute in any way. But more important than contribution is participation. And I asked the question, who is we? Is it the 5%, or do you include the 95% that actually benefit from the efforts of the 5%? And I think that that's a really important question. I think that that's well worth considering, where you sit on the line. Do you want the niceties? Do you want the area closed off? Do you want the security? Do you want all of that stuff? Because we put it into place, because we make the effort to try and do something to counter the ever encroaching decline in the area and the country, in fact, because we see the potential or the consequence. We see that, and we decide, well, we have to do something, like go around and clean up the area, because we know that the government, the local government, is certainly not in a position to do that. They can't even cut the grass on the sidewalks. They can barely pick up the rubbish, the refuse collection, on a regular basis. They certainly can't maintain the roads. The potholes are ridiculous. But who's the we? Is it the 5%? Or is it everybody? And that raises the question, and I asked this some time ago on another forum. I asked the question, how bad does it have to get? How broken does it have to become before you actually get yourself motivated to a point where you do something? And there are extremes to this, because it can get to a point where it gets bad enough where you need to walk into a place and forcibly start taking supplies or whatever. Can it break down to that point? It's possible, but probably not, because you'll probably find that there will be a handful of people that are making it livable for the rest. despite having to still pay taxes. Yeah. But it's a salient question. Who is the we? And what are we doing about it? What are you? What are you doing about it? Are you including yourself in that we? Are you including yourself, your efforts in what will affect everybody? I think in any society, and certainly in a community like this, we will always have people that will ride on the merits or the efforts of others. I used to get fairly aggravated by that because I find it quite rude. I find it unnecessary. But I suppose that it's a general societal thing the planet over where you have the freeloaders and they will just capitalize on the efforts of others, unfortunately. And here we get back to tolerance. The efforts of others, those others that actually do contribute or participate and make life better for everybody else, might need to reconsider just how much of that they are prepared to tolerate. Yeah, I think that's worth considering. So if you are one of those people that do participate and do contribute in some way to trying to make it better, I think you should consider how much it is that you are prepared to tolerate before it all falls apart. Because I guess this is really the warning in all of this, is that the excessive tolerance or unchecked tolerance of everything will lead to the demise of everything for everyone. And eventually, it just becomes harder and harder for those that would try for everybody. It becomes harder and harder. And they give up and walk away. And again, all of this ties back into what I was speaking about earlier, about responsibility, personal responsibility, and that of the collective as well in the community. I think we've gone beyond the point now of only having personal responsibility, although it should be that way. But I don't know that the mindset can be changed rapidly. And people need to consider where those boundaries are. How much will you do for yourself, first of all, and then how much can you do for the collective in a pragmatic way, not in a way that detracts from you, because that's definitely a danger. But also at the same time, while communicating it openly and honestly, because that seems to also have become a very serious problem nowadays. And I think it's since the advent of social media, all of the ease with which people are able to put out messages like this. There's a lot of noise out there, and people don't listen much anymore. And people are not honest about the way they say things and the way things are said or taken. You know, I've always had, I was going to say a problem. It's not a problem, it's just the way I am. I am quite happy to offer my opinion, whether it's on a general problem or on a person. I'll say it. I'll say it to the person's face. If I'm prepared to say it on a video like this, I'm prepared to say it to their face. So, and that's a thing that doesn't really go down too well. Maybe it's a little bit too much honesty. People seem to not be able to be too honest nowadays about things like that, sadly. And again, it's one of those things that all links back into tolerance and responsibility. So instead of waffling more about this now, if you've made it this far, well done. And if you have any thoughts about it, let me know, because I'd be very happy to discuss any of these views and where they might be wrong, inaccurate. I'd be quite happy to discuss uh, those things, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't get said or spoken about, you can't really learn from it. You can't really have an honest life experience. And I guess most of what I think life is about exactly that, about having an honest life experience. Why else are you here? Have a great Sunday. I hope it's warmer where you are than where I am.